My name is Michael, and I work for Security National Mortgage, but one of my biggest passions is to help people through the financial issues of divorce. So what I've found over the years is that sometimes I can tweak, let's say the property has a little bit of equity. The couple has decided that they want out of the home. They're each going to go their separate ways and sell the house. Sometimes I can, if I talk with them first before they get everything finalized and things like that, I can say, well, why don't you pay her $300 a month in child support and take more of the equity so that she can qualify for this house and you can qualify for this house. I mean, there's so many ways that I can help, because I've seen it happen so many times where, you know, the women or the men will come to me and say, hey, what can I qualify for? And I'm like, oh, you pay how much? You know, and then we could have worked it out differently, even if it's just $100 a month. We can work it out differently to make sure that each party can move on and go their separate ways. Another big issue that I have of people with real property is if a lot of times people think that if they sign a quitclaim deed, getting themselves off the title of the mortgage, that they're not responsible for the loan anymore. So not true. So I have it all the time, and it just breaks my heart. And a lot of times people also think that whatever a judge says goes. And in Eric's world, that's true. But in my world, it's not necessarily true. So my credit got screwed up, which I'm such a freak about my credit. I once had an 803 credit score. I was so proud. But you just have to make sure and talk to somebody who knows what it's going to be like in a year or 2 years, somebody that's completely unemotionally involved. I know that's easy for me to say now, but at the time, I had no coaching. I did whatever my attorney said. And it's not that he didn't know. It's just, this is his job, but yet this is my area of expertise. So if you have real property, I would highly recommend talking to a mortgage professional, somebody that you trust, somebody that you're not embarrassed to cry in front of, because I've done my share of that. So if you've got credit cards and things and you are having an amicable separation, divorce, just be sure and make those payments on time. Be considerate of the other person, because it really does affect their ability to move on. So if you can just be, know that Eric knows exactly what he's doing, but also know that there are some ramifications if you don't get yourself off the loan, or you don't refinance yourself off of a credit card or home or whatever you decide to do. Does that sound about right to you? Okay. Any questions I can answer?
Yeah, if you modified your loan, you got a modification, and you were late those 3 times or 4 times, whatever, does that matter, or the modification? I heard something about if you got your loan modified, they can't count those against you.
Make sure you repeat the question into the microphone so people that are not here today can.
Got you. Okay. I'm sorry, what's your name? So what we're asked is, if you were late on your loan and then you decided to do a modification, is that correct?
Right.
And the lates will probably show up on your credit that way, but being in a loan modification does not disqualify you from getting a new loan. There's a waiting period, and then there's extenuating circumstances depending on the type of loan you want to get. But so many lenders were telling borrowers, oh, I can't modify your loan, you have to be late. No, you don't. No, you freaking don't have to be late.
Well, so what I'm saying is it's not the same as what you just said, where if you were late 3 times, it's just like a foreclosure.
Correct.
In this particular case, it's different.
So what he said is if you're late 3 or 4 times, that doesn't necessarily mean it's treated as a foreclosure if you're going into a loan modification. Okay. There are also extenuating circumstances on, if you go, FHA allows for an extenuating circumstance. So if you had loss of job, death of a major wage earner, things like that, you can get into a new loan fairly quickly, as opposed to those horrible waiting periods that you have to do. No.
Ask the question first.
Sorry, what was your name? I'm sorry. He asked if divorce was considered an extenuating circumstances. They have out and out bolded that in their guidelines. Divorce is not an extenuating circumstance.
You mentioned something about, I'm going to repeat my question too,
okay,
because I'm behind the camera, it doesn't mean my voice gets picked up any better. But you mentioned that there may be someone that wants to stay in the house and somebody else who wants to take equity out. Would you address that?
Yes.
How that be done? What's the best way, or some of the best ways you've seen, or what's to be avoided too?
Eric asked if one of the parties wants to stay in the home, they are getting divorced, and the other party is going to leave and wants his equity, correct? The only way to do that is to refinance the loan, which would make it so that the person staying in the home would have to qualify on their own. Or they could take out a home equity loan if there's enough equity and pay out the spouse, but they would also have to continue to make those payments.
Would they still, the home equity, they would still have to qualify?
Correct. So he asked if you still have to qualify for the home equity loan. Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Following up on that, what about situations where somebody says, okay, well, my spouse wants to stay in the home, or I want to stay in the home, and the other person wants the equity? What happens if you don't refinance and the person who stays in the home doesn't pay? You're out, you don't want to be in the home, and that other person does not pay.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about how the lender looks at that and how the lender looks at the decree of divorce and how binding that is on the lender.
Okay. What Eric asked is if, let's say, the wife stays in the property, the husband exits and finds a new place, she and he are both on the loan together, correct? Okay. She decides that she's mad, he's moved on, she's not going to make the payments anymore. So that negatively reflects on his credit and her credit. In a lender's eyes, you're basically in trouble.
But it's in the decree. I mean, the decree says that my wife is going to be responsible. She stayed in the house. Why am I being dinged by the lender?
So Eric says, hey, this isn't fair. The divorce decree, the judge said that, I was to be off the loan, or I am not responsible for this payment anymore. I'm paying her child support.
Put your hair behind your shoulder so the mic doesn't...
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So the lender's going to look at the divorce decree. Well, a loan officer's going to look at the divorce decree and go, you're right, but you probably should have checked on it every month. You're on the loan. It's your responsibility.
And the lender isn't bound by the decree.
The lender is not bound by the divorce decree.
Because the only thing that the decree covers are the parties. And so in a divorce, there are usually, not always, but usually a husband and a wife. But the lender, even though it says wife is staying in the house and wife will be responsible for the loan, that doesn't mean the lender has to take that as gospel and say, oh, well, husband's off the hook. You don't have to pay this. It says that she has to pay it.
Correct.
They're not a party, so they can go after you because they made a contract with you as a borrower.
The divorce decree, the only thing that the divorce decree is good for me is to tell me how much child support you're either paying or receiving, to tell me how old the ages of the children are. So I have to prove, let's say you want to move on. Are you guys together? No. Okay. Let's say you are. What was your name? What was your name? Pays me $500 child support. She's got one child. He makes a boatload of money, right? $500 child support, and the age of your daughter is 16. The divorce decree says as soon as she's 18, she's out of there, okay? I don't have to pay anymore. I can't prove that you're going to receive that child support for another 3 years. So I have to prove you've received it for 3 months, and I have to prove that you're going to receive it for another 3 years. So in a nutshell, I can't count the $500 to qualify you for that home. So that's all the divorce decree tells me, is whether there's real property, how much child support is being paid or received, and what the age of the children are. I don't care if it says he's responsible for all the bills. If you're on the visa, the auto loan, I have to count all of those payments against you.
If you want to get your equity out, what options does the couple have to refinance the loan into the name of the person that stays in? Could you tell us a little bit about if you want to use a sample home with a sample value or a sample amount of equity,
Okay.
things that you typically encounter with people going through a divorce? Could you tell us a little bit about what
What the guidelines are?
And what they, if they're at a certain level, saying, "I'm sorry, you're going to be selling this house if you plan to not stay on the loan."
Okay. What Eric asked was, how does it work if we want to refinance the loan, whether one party wants to stay in or not, or we're cashing out equity? On a conventional loan, which is anything under $417,000, the guidelines are you can go up to 85% max cash out of the appraised value. So if I've got a $200,000 loan, 80% of that is 180?
Yeah.
Yes, right. 180, so 85% would give me a few more $1,000s. That's the most I can loan on that property, because the investor wants to know, hey, I've got some wiggle room, and if they default, I'm going to make some cash. Okay?
Let me give you another example.
Okay.
So wife wants to stay in the house, and let me give you a stark example. She's been a stay-at-home mom the entire marriage. They've been married for 15 years, and let's assume that there are 11 years left on the mortgage.
Okay.
And they've got the $180,000 in equity or something like that, or let's say $175,000. She has no work history, but she gets $2,000 a month in alimony.
Mm-hmm.
Could you repeat that back and then?
Mm-hmm. So we've got a home, and you didn't mean $175,000 in equity. You meant
The other way around.
Okay. So let's say property value is $200,000 and we've got $20,000 in equity. $25,000 in equity. So the wife has never been working outside the home. She's taking care of the kids, hardest job. And she's going to stay in the property, and she receives $2,000 a month in alimony. Any child support?
Yes. Let's assume that it's $900.
Okay, so she receives $2,900 in income. As long as I can prove that that income will continue for the next 3 years, I can use that to qualify her on that mortgage, and we can do up to 85% and take her husband off the loan. Now, if they owe, same scenario, say they owe $150,000. So I've got $25,000 that I can use to cash him out. Clear as mud? So let's take the $200,000 loan amount again. We owe $150,000 on it. Husband and wife owe they probably owe less than that if they've been in 11 years. They owe $120,000, they owe $130,000 on it. Okay? I can loan up to $175,000, so that means I have $45,000 in equity that they can either split, or we can tweak the alimony and child support so that everybody can possibly get on with their lives in an equitable manner. Does that answer your question, Eric? Okay.
When you say tweak the alimony and child support,
That
would revolve him.
Correct. Correct. Okay. So this is all pre-paperwork, pre-divorce. So in a perfect world, which most of the attorneys that I work with do call me and say, hey, I've got real property, and they really don't even want to deal with it. They just give it to me, and I go, okay, this is what we need. And then they go back and tell them their story and what the attorney the story and what can happen, because I don't know what the guidelines are for child support or alimony or anything like that. All I know is what I can use and what I can't use.
So I have a question for you. Even if that wife who's going to be getting alimony for at least 3 years remarries within 2, the bank just takes that chance.
Correct.
The lender takes that chance.
Or they unlawfully cohabitate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, the unlawful cohabitation actually is a pretty good deal for the wife, because she can still collect the alimony because she's not remarried.
Mine ended.
Yeah, but that's because
I didn't know that.
That's because you got caught, right? Or because you actually said,
I was honest.
Right?
Yeah, I was.
So what I'm saying is that, so the wife in that situation says, yeah, I've been working, I have not worked outside the home, and all I have to do is show that I'm going to get alimony and child support in a certain amount for 3 years, even though I can cut that off by marrying after 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask everybody here, so do you understand that a lot of times a woman, or it could be the husband, but it's often a mom who doesn't have a job and stuff like that might say, but I can't qualify. My child support and alimony isn't enough. And I don't want to refinance because because the interest rate may go up. So she says, just let me stay here, and I promise that I will pay on time and in full every single month. If you make that agreement and she defaults, then that does not protect you as the person.
As the husband.
Yeah.
Correct.
That doesn't protect you. I mean, they can default. I mean, they can foreclose on both of you, and both of your credit reports and scores will take a hit.
Correct.
And you can go back to court and say, that's not fair, this shouldn't have happened to me.
Wow.
Yeah, right. But the lender isn't going to care, because the lender's not bound to that.
If I were the husband in that scenario, I would, because you're both on the loan, so you're both going to have access online to your payments, I would make sure that mortgage payment is paid every single month. And I mean, there's no way I would ever let that go.
Now, if I may for a second, what you can do is, it may be that you're saying, well, I'd really prefer if I'm the one that's moving out of the house and wants my equity, but that a refinance is not possible. You can say, all right, I will agree to you staying in the house, and you're responsible, but I will monitor this. And if you don't pay, I will make sure that if you haven't paid by the deadline, that I pay within the grace period, so that the credit and everything on my end is crystal clean.
Mm-hmm.
But I can then go to you as the wife staying in the house and say, you didn't pay. Now, if you keep doing this, I'm going to go to court and I'm going to ask for a modification of the decree saying, get out. You can also, if you anticipate that's a problem, you can put right in your decree saying, let's say Michael and I are divorcing. It's like, Michael, you're responsible to pay the mortgage. You're not refinancing it because you can't afford it, but you can afford to pay the payment as it stands. But if you are late once, twice, 3 times, I mean, any of those will show up in a decree. Then after let's assume that it says you can't be late more than 3 times. I can monitor it and I can pay it, and then let's assume you pay late. But then you fail to pay on time the 3rd time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a reserve because I knew this was going to happen, and I pay it the 3rd time. I can then run to the court and say, Your Honor, it says right here that if she is late 3 times, that I can then sell the house out from under her, and then we divide the equity. That doesn't mean that I get all the equity. That doesn't mean that I'm somehow winning some kind of lottery or getting a windfall. But it does mean that it's like, look, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. I shouldn't have to worry about you failing to pay the mortgage month after month. And so you can do that too. So you put that in the decree. That, again, all the lender cares about is getting paid on time and in full.
And if you and Michael were coming to me and this was happening, I wouldn't let it go once.
Well, remember, in this scenario, the ex-husband's been keeping an eye on it and paid within the grace period.
So it's not being reported late.
It's not
okay.
being reported late. He knows that your decree says you have to pay on the day it's due, or it's considered late.
So you're paying before the 15th.
Yeah, you
Correct.
fail to pay.
Gotcha.
And then I pay within the grace period, so everybody's happy on the lender's side. Then the next month you fail to pay on time. I pay it anyway within the grace period. The lender's fine.
Yeah.
You do it a third time. It doesn't have to be 3 times in a row. It could be, okay, you've learned your lesson, and then 6 months from now, you fail to pay again. I can then say, well, look, our decree says, if I put that in there in advance, if you are late 3 times, you don't get to stay there anymore. And then it can trigger a thing that says either I can throw you out and I can move in, or I can now have the power to sell the house. Not because I'm evil or malicious, but because I'm tired of you putting my credit at risk.
Correct.
And the court will say, 3 times is more than fair.
Yeah.
It probably indicates you've bitten off more than you can chew, or you're just a flake who doesn't take things seriously. Either way, that's enough for the court to say, you will not be entrusted with this mortgage anymore. You haven't refinanced it, so you're adversely affecting your ex by being late all the time. We're going to fix that.
I would highly recommend that being in every divorce decree.
So how fast would the court make them move out?
In those situations, the court is usually going to act pretty quick, because the good news is most judges own homes. And a lot of judges have been divorced. And so they realize that the longer that I drag this out, the more times she has an opportunity to fail to pay on time, and the more exposure the innocent spouse, ex-spouse, who's just saying, I was trying to do her a favor.
I was trying to be nice.
Yeah, trying to be nice by not insisting she refinance when she didn't have the ability. And so the courts will be pretty good about saying, get out. Or, for example, they'd say, well, ex-husband, you've done nothing wrong. You are the injured party. So we will tell her to get out so she can't squat there and continue to live there, not pay, and then cook kimchi all day and then drive the potential buyers away. They can say, you get out, and then ex-husband, if you want to live there, you can just take over the payments and live there. Or
hire a realtor.
Hire a realtor all by yourself without your flaky ex-wife or ex-husband being involved so that you can get the thing going. You'll still have to pay.
So how would the equity work out in this situation?
Well, and that was what I was saying, is that if the equity is agreed to be divided 50-50, and most people do, you don't get extra equity because of this. What you're really doing is by getting her out of the house and selling it, you're just cutting your risk of being exposed to a foreclosure. But you don't get rewarded, and you don't get a booby prize for her failure to comply. You could put something in the decree like that if she fails to make the payments and you have to go through all this hoop jumping, that you get 60% of the equity. But my point is that the equity doesn't change because of that unless you put that in the decree. There's no law, there's no rule.
I've never seen it.
Is there anything else that comes to mind as we talk about these things that, it's interesting. You're saying it would be good to talk to a mortgage officer before you go to trial, before you settle the case.
Absolutely. Because if attorneys don't have the type of mindset that I do, and I don't have the type of mindset that you do. And so if there's real property and somebody really wants to stay, or they want to, hey, look, we want to go our separate ways, we think we can buy these 2 houses separately, it's worth talking to somebody.
Here's another question a lot of people will ask, is I'm just outside of the qualifying to refinance, and my parents will give me $20,000 or $10,000.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yep.
Is that okay?
Or do
lenders look at that and say, wait a minute, that's like an artificial infusion of
cash?
Nope.
I just have to know where the cash came from. And they can also co-sign. Any family member could come in and co-sign so that whoever wants to stay in that property can stay in that property. They do have to go FHA. You can't go conventional or VA. You have to go FHA, but you can. That happens all the time.
Is that a problem?
No.
Going FHA? What does that mean?
Right now, an FHA loan, the mortgage insurance premium is higher, typically, than a conventional loan. If someone has, really good credit scores and 5% of their own money, I would never give them an FHA loan.
Does it have to be a family member?
Yes.
To co-sign?
Yes. Or
that's a good question.
Do you want me to repeat that? Does it have to be a family member in order to co-sign on an FHA loan? In most cases, yes. However, if you have a godmother or a godfather or a grandparent that raised you that has been significantly influential in your life, I have to prove it. I'm just like an attorney as far as Yeah, you can tell me all you want, but it's what I can prove. I would have to prove that relationship. I've given pictures. I've given letters to prove a relationship. But it can't just be my neighbor, my friend Bob. Because there's no accountability in their minds. Which
They're relying on the familiar relationship to maintain.
Right.
How do you look at unreported income?
I don't look at it. I can't look at it.
Even though it can be proven as income, but it's not reported as paid taxes on.
Correct. Those loans are long gone. I do, however, if you're an investor, we have a stated income program. As an investor, you have to have 40% down, and then you can tell me how much you make.
Maybe that's a question for Eric. Unreported income from my spouse is more than her reported income. How do I deal with that?
In the context of a refinance?
In the context of everything.
Anything.
Unfortunately, that would be a discussion in its own right that we could go on for a long time. But in the context of this refinance idea, saying like, well, you can't. It's like, so she's saying I can't refinance for whatever reason. Just let me stay in there, and I promise I'll pay. And let's assume that you're saying, well, you probably can, given the amount of income you actually make. Yes, you can't qualify to refinance because you only report 50% of your actual income. But I know you'll be good for it as long as you spend the money. From talking to Michael here, it looks to me like even if you could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, I've got proof. The person that's been paying the money comes in and says, oh yeah, I pay her $10,000 a month, unreported, under the table.
If you don't pay taxes on it, I can't use it.
And I can't bear the shame anymore, so I'm going to confess and I'm going to sign it in a sworn affidavit. The answer is that the bank will just say, well, we won't do it.
Yeah.
I guess hard money lenders could do whatever they wanted.
Right.
But when it comes to somebody that's insured or through a FHA or some other program, so
the most. It's funny to me. It's one spectrum to the other. The most issues I have with unreported income are doctors, attorneys that make a lot of money, but they can, if they have their own practices, they can write it all off and pay taxes on like $100,000. But they make $500,000. Oh, sorry, dude, I can only do it on $100,000. Then I have dancers who are paid $2,500 a year, but pull in $10,000 a month in cash. Sorry, I can qualify you for $100 a month in a house payment, and that just isn't available.
And when you say dancers, you mean strippers?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just wanted to,
My daughters are ballerinas. So
yeah, exactly. I just want to make sure people didn't get the wrong impression. And somehow,
Exotic dancer?
Yes.
Is that better?
Well, another question is, so if both parties are still on the mortgage that is
Right.
there,
Right.
and things are going well, it's being paid and all that kind of stuff like that, can someone like myself go out and apply and qualify for another loan on a home?
That's a great question. Should I repeat that? What was your name? Asked is if your wife is living in the property, let's say, she's making the payments.
And I'm making the payment.
You're making the payments.
50-50 should be.
Okay.
Let's say it's 50.
Okay, this is going
But
to,
my name is on the mortgage.
and her name is on the
It's on
mortgage.
the mortgage, so I feel it's my responsibility to at least pay half because I'm protecting my equity.
Okay,
But I want to buy a home
okay.
in my name only.
In that case, you would have to qualify for both house payments. I would,
100% of both house payments.
correct.
It's better to pay all that stuff off before you file. Every single thing except a mortgage, which
Or-
you obviously cannot
Or
pay off.
refinance it into,
Well, I mean, the credit card is $1,000 or kind of.
oh, for heavens. Okay,
I mean, it's nothing.
yeah.
I mean, I should just go ahead and just pay it, and I can. And I probably will now, just to get rid of it. But
And if he pays that off, can't that lessen her equity? $1,000, I mean, I'm sure you could work that. I
I'm
mean,
going to say, you probably don't want to voluntarily pay that off because it'll just be a gift. And if you don't agree to offset something in advance, you paying it off will be like, well, I didn't ask you to do it, so don't expect me to give you credit for $1,000 somewhere else. Now, if you don't care, you're saying it's $1,000 and I can handle it, then that's probably okay. But I would make sure you're saying, here's what I'm going to do to make it easier for you to refinance. Here's what I expect you to do in response.
And I would definitely refinance that.
Of a family real estate sale.
Oh, okay.
So that may allow her to probably not qualify for a loan, but that may allow her to pay me what we consider my portion of the equity to be from that. Mm-hmm. Then how would I get my name off that? She's still got to requalify for that house.
She would have to qualify. She would have to put a chunk of that real estate down on the loan.
She doesn't have that kind of work history to qualify for that size of a loan. It'll be the value will be a $400,000 value on the home.
Well, how much money is she getting in real estate?
I have no idea.
Like $10,000 or $100,000?
Oh, it'd be $30,000 to $40,000.
Oh, okay.
It's a pretty nice piece of property.
Okay. Would you want the house if she...
If she couldn't, I would, yeah. But that's where all my kids live. So she couldn't, but I don't want to take her out of the house.
No.
And she wants to stay, so I want her to stay. That's fine.
Because the kids are there.
Kids are there.
Yeah.
So refinance isn't really a worry?
For me, it's not, because I qualify for the home without her income, But she's on the loan. She didn't have to be. I made her.
Worried about being able to keep her in the home with the kids and getting your own additional home?
If I'm paying 100% of both mortgages, yes, I'm worried about that.
And you are worried about, right? This isn't an if question. This is a...
Well, I am worried about that, yeah. And that's being selfish on my part, wanting to own my own home.
No, it's not.
But I'm just saying,
Maybe selfish, but it's kind of normal.
I know, but,
It's
I can
self-full.
live in this tiny little apartment I'm living in and pay virtually nothing. And not, but I don't want to live that way.
Well, then this is a good, if I may, how old are the kids?
Oh, 24, 20, 15, and 13.
So see, you really only have
15,
5
13.
years to worry about.
Oh, I know.
So,
But
not just for your benefit, for the benefit of other people.
The 24-year-old and the 13-year-old are handicapped.
Oh, well, let's assume they weren't handicapped for us. In a hypothetical, remember, folks, if we didn't have the handicapped element in there, it'd be like, okay, 5 years, hang in there, live in this tiny apartment for 5 years, and then your qualifications go up.
Yeah.
There are fewer variables for the lender to consider. Right?
Because probably she would be working more, maybe remarried.
Do you guys ask questions about minor children or disabled children?
Yes. We don't ask about disabled children. We just say, how many children do you have? What are your dependents?
And how old are they?
What are your dependents? So your 24-year-old would be a dependent if he's...
Well, he's not a dependent. He's not labeled handicap anymore. He's about to graduate college. All that kind of stuff.
Okay.
My 13-year-old has an IEP, is autistic, and all that kind of stuff. We have all that. My 24-year-old never was qualified as but he is, handicapped.
So they will look at a dependent, whether it's an adult dependent or a minor
Correct.
dependent. Mm-hmm. So is a minor dependent like 2 strikes, or just being a minor alone, no matter how disabled you are? Does that matter?
No, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Because some loans are income qualifying, so it depends on how many people reside in the property, as to how much money I can lend you or what your limits are and things like that. So.
Is somebody who's 23 and going to college considered a dependent?
If you claim them as a dependent,
in my eyes,
on your taxes, they're a dependent, right?
In my eyes, yes.
Even though you don't get the child credit.
Correct. On your taxes.
That 17 and under, over that, you don't get that.
Right.
Because I just did my taxes. And my son, my 24-year-old, did his 1040 easy, and that question is asked on there. And
are you being claimed by anyone else?
It turns out I am claiming him.
And that gives me what about children that receive government benefits, but they're living with the spouse who wants to refinance? Can that spouse piggyback?
That spouse can claim that income.
Yes. That income? Mm-hmm. Does the spouse have to be the guardian of that person or some kind of trustee?
I have to have legal documents. Yeah.
So let's assume that they are. Let's assume that you've got the spouse who decides to live with the adult child receiving some kind of government benefit, if that is something that goes directly to the child, adult or otherwise, you cannot count that as income for the parent. Is that right?
No, I can.
You can.
Yes, because it's household.
So all you have to do, okay, that's what I was asking. So all you have to do is show, I'm living with this person. That could change tomorrow, but for now, okay. So
Like a Social Security,
right.
disability,
Benefits or
correct?
something like that. It's like, well, this child may not be here tomorrow, but for now, this is account for my income.
If this 24-year-old dependent is paying rent,
Can she count that as income? No. There used to be a border income.
That is income?
There used to be a border income thing, and
What if you have somebody outside or say you have a mother-in-law apartment and you're renting that out?
as long as it's showing on your Schedule E on your tax returns, I can claim that as income.
But a child paying rent cannot.
Cannot.
That's weird. I wouldn't know that.
I made my kids pay rent, so, but
But it
no.
didn't do you good.
No. Well, it did me good. It
Right,
taught them a
right.
lesson, but yeah.
But for refinance
No.
purposes.
Nope.
Huh.
Nope.
Are there any other weird quirks like that? Now that we're kind of getting into government benefits or renting
There's so many
children?
weird quirks.
Yeah. So people should look into them all.
Yeah.
To find out if it dings.
And there's
or-
so many, like these weird things people come in and say, well, I heard this and I heard that. And I'm like, what? Yeah. So
So, how much does it cost to talk to you, consult with you?
nothing. Yeah, nothing.
So you just-
I'm in the Union Park area.
You get your money off the back end if.
Yeah.
there's
Yeah, if you do a loan with me, I make money. That's, yeah.
Right.
But no, I just got really tired of having these. It was mostly women that came in and just could not refinance, and it was just within $200 that if I could have talked to the attorney before they finalized the papers, we could have maybe.
Give us an example of something where they were $200 short of the goal. And
Okay, so this was right before Christmas. Their divorce was final, unfortunately, and her husband ran off with the aerobics instructor or something, and so she was left. He did show up for court. He was ordered to pay $1,100 in child support. They have 6 children. $1,100 in child support, and they were married for 23 years, I believe. And so she was receiving, I think, $500 in alimony. And the home, he just said, I don't want any equity. I don't want anything to do with you guys. I'm out. So she had the equity of about $70,000. I said, what do you think your home is worth? Well, they were underwater in their home. So that was a problem. I said, let's see if we can refinance you. Because we can't, if he wanted any equity, we can't cash out or do
explain
anything.
what underwater means.
Sorry.
I have no idea what.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Underwater means you owe more than it's worth. You guys probably, yeah.
Can you just say that she had $70,000 in equity? So I don't.
In her head.
Oh, in her head.
Mm-hmm. Because she bought it for this.
Now,
She owes this.
How was she? What hope did she have?
We were going to talk about refinancing and her, staying in the property because she knew her husband wasn't going to pay. She told me this out loud. Okay. She knew he wasn't going to pay. I said, what are you going to do for work? She goes, well, I have my degree in accounting. I can go get a job. So I Google how much do accountants make in Utah. It's pretty pathetic. And I'm like $30,000 a year. She's going to go out, get a job. She's going to make $30,000 a year.
And she's still got 6 kids.
She's still got 6 kids. So she had to go. I ran some numbers. She came back the next day and she said, well, the ex calls me. He says, I really am going to pay you. I really am going to pay you the money. I'm sorry for what I've done. But again, I just want to be with the aerobics instructor. So that made me feel better knowing that he really was going to pay. He has a great job. Okay. I needed $300 more a month in child support in order to qualify her.
Or alimony, right?
So I would rather have child support.
Why is that?
Because,
It's guaranteed over 3 years.
yeah, because like you said, the alimony, she could get married tomorrow and that would be gone. I would rather see $300 more on the child support. And that's just a personal deal. And so, I mean, that's how close we were. $300. And I can gross up child support. Sorry, I didn't even talk about that. Ding.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. What grossing up means in my world is I can times it by 125%. So I can give you, because you don't pay taxes on child support, you pay taxes on alimony. So if you're getting $300 in child support or I can gross that up 125%. Okay? So that they can qualify. So I would rather see it on the child support end.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there any other question?
I've got another question.
You bet.
So I got divorced in 2007 when the housing was just going crazy.
Yep.
So it's climbing. And I'm getting divorced, and I'm saying I want to stop the equity where it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the crash. So is it better to do the equity at a certain number? Say, this is the day we're getting divorced, the house is worth this, so this is the equity? Or is it better to do like a 50-50 when you sell it?
That's probably a better question for Eric.
Yeah, and in just real briefly, if you were out of the house and she continued to make the mortgage payment, then it would be a windfall to you, because if she paid it for 10 more years until you got cashed out, you get 50% of that 10 years, and you don't deserve it because she's the only one paying. So there are other ways that you could have handled that, where you could have said, in fact, people will do that now. They'll say, hey, with the way the real estate market just climbed and then crashed, the last thing I want to do is fix a specific value. So they could say something about, like, well, as long as the equity doesn't plummet, it'll be this. But if it does, it'll be, half of whatever the actual value is, or you can look back to a certain time. There are many things you could do to make it so you're not artificially just creating a value that is dependent on a market that may not support it anymore.
And I just have had 2 divorce decrees in the last month where they've said, we will split the equity when the mom gets a job, she's made the house payments for a year, and she can refinance off of the home, refinance him off of the home. We'll take the equity at that time. Regardless of...
I mean, a lot of people did the same thing.
Right.
And there was equity at that time. So I guess one of the lessons is cash out that equity right then and there, and don't let a whole lot of time pass, because then you get burned as you were.
Right.
But it's not, you had no way of foreseeing that.
No.
Right. It was climbing, and I had 90 grand of equity, so I was just like,
Score. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's give a round of applause, please.
Oh.
So nice again, Michael, being here.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Oh, why don't you do us this favor? Before you take the microphone off, give us your name, your company again, and your contact information.
Okay. Michal Koncar, Security National Mortgage. My phone number is 801-599-0777.
And by the way, how do we know each other? We
really don't.
Yeah.
We have a BNI friend, which is a networking group, and he referred me to Eric.
And I'm not in that group.
Yeah.
So,
It's all about who you know. Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you.